When I graduated in 2004, I unknowingly became the first person of Pacific descent to graduate with a PhD from an English department in this country, which, you know, in 2004 was just ridiculous. What an insult, right? What an insult to the diversity and the hailed celebration of Auckland being the largest Polynesian city in the world. It's like, really? And I'm your first? I also, you know, when I put on that graduation gown, that heavy black gown, I also felt the mantle of representation falling quite heavy on my shoulders. And I had to argue with the university, not too strongly, but nevertheless I still had to present my argument that part of my service as an academic was to go into schools. And if the university was serious about increasing the numbers of Māori and Pasifika students enrolled in tertiary education, then we have to go young. My name is Selina Tusitala Marsh. I've got Samoan and Tuvaluan and German from my mother's side, and English, French and Scottish from my father's side. 2017, I was named as the New Zealand Poet Laureate for the next 2 years. I'm also an associate professor teaching Pacific literature, Māori literature and creative writing at the University of Auckland. Warm Pacific greetings to you all. Thank you so much to St. Joseph's. I was 11 when Sam Hunt came to our Avondale school, and he literally changed my poetry rules forever. A fue is the orator's fly whisk. Yeah. Hands up if you've seen this before. Woo! And it was as much as who he was than what he recited off heart by memory. Wild hair everywhere and his cool jeans, and he was like a rock star, and I just sat there completely enamoured of the journeys that he took us all on, just with the power of his words embodied in this swag and this performance. It's to keep away a lot of flies. And if that happened to me when I was 11, that has to happen to every 11-year-old in this country. They have to be given the opportunity to see poetry and experience poetry in a way that just completely explodes their world. Boys and girls, may I introduce to you Tusitala Toko. Albert Wendt wrote the first novel from a Pacific author's perspective in the 1970s. My encountering of Albert came quite late. It was in the second year of my master's, where I was doing a thesis on, and here's the big long title, Polynesian identification with Black American popular culture through the subversive road films of Whoopi Goldberg. So here has been a connective theme in my research and in both my critical and my creative writing. And my marks came to the attention of Albert Wendt and Witi Ihumaera, and they'd called me into their office to discuss what my plans were. So my plans were zilch. Like, I had won already, right? I had gone to university. I had been the first in my family to do so. And they said, well, you need to do a PhD with your grades. And I was like, well, who me? You know, and they said, well, yes, you. We're going to be retiring soon, and if no one takes our place, the field that we fought for the last 2 decades will close up, and that field being Māori and Pacific literature. I needed nurturing emotionally. I was still trying to cope with the am I enough? am I enough as I am? And that's where Albert's partner, Reina Whaitiri, came in, because she was heading the Tertiary Foundation Certificate program at the time. And she's a tough cookie, but she met me and met my emotional needs. She really wrapped me in tough love and aroha. So I borrowed their surety, I borrowed their confidence, and I began a PhD. I did my PhD doctoral work on the first 5 Pacific women poets to publish sole collections of poetry in English. They are Konai Haluthaman from Tonga, Mamoi Maliatoa von Reiki from Samoa, Julie Makini, who published under the name Sipolo from the Solomon Islands, Grace Meromolisa from Vanuatu, and Haunani K. Trask from Hawaii. I decided to do my doctoral study on these formative women poets, partly because I was frustrated with my own education as a brown woman growing up in Aotearoa, New Zealand, in Auckland, purportedly the largest Polynesian city in the world. I didn't come across Pacific women poets until the second year of my master's in English literature. Women writers have always been there, but from a New Zealand vantage point, as a student, you rely on literary criticism written by white males. So it's easy for Pacific women's voices to fall by the wayside or not be acknowledged or just forgotten. Avondale Library was a place that we would walk past on the way to school, on the way home from school. And the day I learned that I didn't need money to get books out, because I didn't realise what a library was until I followed my little Balangi friends after school one day. And it was like they were saying, you fill out this form and you get a library card and then you can take out all these books. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Because before that, Mum would take us to the Salvation Army, any of the second-hand shops, the Avondale Spider junkyard shop that used to be in Avondale. And, to get us out of her hair, probably, she'd just give us 50 cents and we'd go and explore. And I'd always come home with a cardboard box full of books. So, whatever was there, I would take. Mum was a great performer, and she dealt with patronising and racist comments quite deftly. My parents divorced when I was around 8, and so Mum had to go on the solo mother's benefit. And I remember the social welfare man talking down to her, and he said something like, you people need to work when you come to this country. And she replied, really smiling really sweetly, yeah, okay, yeah, which means to eat shit. And so, I remember various friends of hers who would tease her about being a bunga and, she just didn't let it stick. It would just flow off her. And I think I've picked up that skill from her. I don't tell people to eat shit, but I do it in other ways, yeah.
It's called the va in Samoan philosophy. What you do affects me. What we do affects the sea, land, wildlife.
In 2016, I was made the Commonwealth Poet, and it came with a commissioned poem for Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II.
Bees thrive in hives, keeping their queen.
When you are in situations where you're the only one doing what you're doing, the only one who looks and sounds like you, it's always going to kind of be whispering around the corner, are you enough? Am I enough? But what gets stronger is your own reply. You know, what gets stronger is your own sense of self that makes that question redundant. Let your yes be yes, let your no be no, write and follow in the footsteps of all your heroes, write out of happy accidents, write when there's no precedent, write. I had woken up one day to a headline in the Herald that called out Pacific Island peoples as being a brown underclass sucking New Zealand's economy dry. And I thought, no, we're not. Everyone I know in my family works shift work. Everyone I know came in when the immigration floodgates opened up and welcomed blue-collar workers, right? And then just as quickly shut them in the mid-70s with the global oil crisis, right? So you're welcome here and then you're not welcome here. 2 academic reviews were done of this academics' research, and floor after floor after floor were pointed out. It was quite a great moment for people to rally together. And I just wanted to write a poem. I thought, well, what can I do to contribute? I just felt angry and wanted to write a poem. And I began with me. You know, I'm a fast-talking PI, I'm a power-walking PI, I'm a demographic, hieroglyphic, fact sheet welding PI. And so it begins. You know, I was part of that demographic that refused to be just nullified by these really out-of-date generalisations. The problem is that general New Zealand read the headlines and that's it. And for many people, it just simply confirmed their stereotypes. And I thought, no, that's not happening, not on our watch, no longer, right? And so Fast Talking PI was about painting lots of different stories. So it covers a lot of different things that PI people, like any people, do. The hardest thing about what I do is maintaining balance between all the roles and functions I fulfill in my life. So for me, that is maintaining a marriage that is this year 24 years old. It's being a mother to 3 rambunctious, testosterone-driven, rugby league playing boys who don't give a stuff about poetry. It's being an active poet and the current poet Laureate. It's being a Pasifika scholar, and it's about being someone who needs to move in order to process life, particularly its stresses, someone who trail runs and needs social interaction of a completely different kind other than the one I get from being at university and then being in the community. One of the most challenging things is that I do what I'm passionate about, and so the boundaries between personal and political, personal and professional often bleed in together. One of the biggest muscle that I have to train is the no muscle, and it's understanding that saying no to others is actually saying yes to me and my own projects that I'm doing for the sake of the wider community or for the sake of my own mental health, the sake of my own well-being. So it's the supreme balancing act. And that is literally carved into my toko. I am there in a tiki form, arms outstretched, balancing on a tightrope. And the best way that I can balance is by keeping my arms outstretched, right, and remaining open to the world while negotiating one foot in front of the other, my own particular tightrope, my own line. And for me, that's the poetic line, the bloodline to my family and to my various communities.
Thank you.
But do you know the truth?
It still doesn't cease to surprise me that when I go into schools, I'm particularly well received by young Pacific girls. They just want to hug you. They just want to touch you. They want to ask you questions and they want to kind of compare their shoe sizes with your shoe size. It's almost like they're checking to make sure you're real and that you're part of them, that you are touchable, right? I didn't have that growing up. Even with Sam Hunt, yes, he was amazing. I didn't go up and hold his hand while I was talking to him. And, you know, I grew up feeling a bit like that, with my nose pressed against stuff that I thought I might like, but didn't know how to connect with that.
So when I say to you, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to write, I really want you to write. And the only rule is that you don't stop writing until I call time.
Creative writing is about the journey as much as the finished product of getting something done. And everyone has this internal censor in them. And I see it in kids around the age of 11. They start switching into being more self-conscious about what they're writing. So something happens where that free-flowing thought begins to stop. And it's about keeping that freedom going and building it up.
My grandma is the toko toko's fue. Its many strands are the many notes my grandmother sang. All the threads weave to make her story worth telling.
My loud voice is the toko toko's solid steel. Loud, strong, and bold. Nothing can stop me, dent me, or scratch me.
It's about freedom of voice, really. And knowing that things around you might conspire to silence you, but you have to believe in yourself enough to keep the line going.
Tēnā koutou irirangi te motu i te pūtia tautoko kārawe.